Live from the Washington, D.C. area, it's the Inside Scoop. All the news that our viewers want to know. Now, here's the host.
Welcome back to Inside Scoop. I'm your host this week, Mary Barthelson. Our guest tonight is Bryan Graham, Chair of the Fairfax County Democratic Committee. Bryan, thank you so much for joining us.
Oh, thanks for having me.
Can you tell us a little bit about yourself and introduce yourself to our audience?
Sure. I'm the elected county chair of the Fairfax County Democratic Committee. I'm in my fourth year and final year of that in that role. I'm not running again. I've lived in Fairfax County for the majority of my life now, since college, and I guess I'm a technology consultant. I do solution architecture in the consulting industry.
So how did you first get involved in the Democratic Party? I'm assuming you did not just jump straight into being chair.
Yeah,
so what was that progression like?
Well, actually, I got motivated by kind of a very inspirational person, Barack Obama, in kind of late 2007. It kind of actually a personal thing. I have a family member who had health issues, and I had real concerns about the continuance of healthcare, right? That person is diagnosed with something. If they lost their job at that time, then they would never get care for that thing from an insurance carrier, which was just crazy to me. So that was one of the things that motivated me to get involved in politics. And I spent a lot of time volunteering in the Obama campaign. And somehow I've gotten to where I am, not just as a volunteer, spending my time and my passion in helping to elect people that support my ideas. So at the end of that campaign, I spent my time I was like, what's next? I've spent all this time and energy on this thing. And the thing that actually really got me motivated to get involved in the local committee was I had, at the time, lived in Centerville, and we had just elected the first black president of the United States. And for my member of the House of Delegates, I didn't have an option. I had a Republican or write-in. Those were the options on my ballot that year. Tim Hugo was my delegate at the time. And that motivated me to figure out how could I get involved with local politics and make sure that we do have options when we have elections.
So I'm assuming you joined the committee first as a member, and then you worked your way up to being chair.
Yeah, I joined the committee, and really I got involved more locally at the Sully level at that time than the full Fairfax County Democratic Committee. But as a technology guy, they pulled me in to kind of redo some of the websites and things, and eventually I became the vice chair of the Sully district. And when the chair left, I became chair kind of naturally. And I just kind of worked my way up there. I was vice chair of technology for the committee as well. And I've been involved in other levels of the Democratic Party of Virginia as well, in the 11th Congressional District Committee.
And you've certainly had your hands full as chair the last few years. Before we dive into the election results, I want to talk a little bit about redistricting, because I know that reshaped the map for a lot of people. How did redistricting reshape the political landscape in Fairfax and the rest of Northern Virginia? Did that make the map more or less favorable to Democrats?
Sure. So the Democratic Committee, Fairfax County Democratic Committee, actually had a position on the redistricting amendment that was put into place. As a result of that, we kind of accidentally ended up with probably the most fair map that we've had in a long time, right? So what was created and what we passed in an amendment, a constitutional amendment, was a bipartisan commission, and which is made up half of citizens and half of legislators. And that commission, when I say failed, it couldn't come up with maps on its own. And the fail-safe in that amendment is that the Supreme Court basically draws maps, but they do that by appointing special masters. So people that were outside of the state that didn't really have kind of a vested interest are the people that drew our maps this year, or I guess that are now in effect in this year's elections, right? So the result of that on the Virginia scale, in terms of the House of Delegates and the state Senate, is that we had more compact districts. We had districts that didn't break boundaries of like counties and jurisdictions as much as we did before. So I think that we got what I would call more fair districts. It just as a side note, I don't think that that's really the final solution on that. I think there's still kind of changes that need to be made to have more fair redistricting. But the result of that, I think, and it's kind of interesting when we look at the results, when we talk about the results, to see kind of how that played out. But we, like in Fairfax County, as an example, we have fewer elected delegates than we did before, because we had a number of delegates that were kind of on the edges of the county that would kind of come in from Arlington or Alexandria or other counties, but now a lot of our districts end at the county border, so there's only a couple of them that kind of cross now. So I think we have better districts. I mean, you can have complaints about some of the things that they did, just generally. And then the other thing that happens always with redistricting is, what is the end result of like where our incumbents end up? Are two people in the same district? Are there open districts? Those are interesting things to look at. And then there's also kind of the county reapportionment that happens too. And we didn't see a lot of big changes in the county. It's kind of interesting. That still stays with the Board of Supervisors. They get to choose how they do the redistricting. So they have a citizen commission that provides input, but ultimately they are the ones that made the decisions. And I think 7 or 8 precincts moved from one district to another in Fairfax County, but there were not very large changes.
And one of the consequences that I saw from the redistricting, as you mentioned, was the incumbents being redistricted into the same district together.
Right.
And we had a whole slew of retirements in part because of that. I know some people were aging out or leaving on to do other things. And I saw one article that put the total number of retirements in the General Assembly at 29 people retiring in the House and the Senate, and that includes Democrats and Republicans. So who has Fairfax lost to retirement this year?
Well, before I answer that question, it's actually we're going to have a very different General Assembly. It's actually very interesting. In the Senate, we have a lot of new people. I mean, that don't have seniority, that aren't coming from other places as well. So I think it's going to be very interesting to see what the General Assembly does. But in Fairfax County, in particular, we lost the majority leader in the Senate, Dick Saslaw, who was drawn into a district with Dave Marsden. I think he was going to retire anyway, but that's something, that was one of the results of that anyway. Janet Howell, I think, is in a similar position. Senator Janet Howell, she was also, I think, thinking about retirement, but she got drawn into a district with Jennifer Voisko. Kay Corey, on the House side, Kay Corey was drawn into a district with Marcus Simon, HD 13, and she decided to retire as well. And then I guess the last from the redistricting kind of results was Eileen Fillercorn, former Speaker Eileen Fillercorn, who was drawn into HD 18 with Kathy Tran. And of course, she has now announced that she's running for Congress. So she had other plans. I think some of the other people that didn't run again might have those, or other retirements might still run for something else. But I think those are the ones that were created by drawing 2 incumbents into the same district.
So are a lot of those seats now being filled with prior incumbents, or do you think it's more new people, you would say?
Well, I think it kind of changes one, right? I mean, Marsden and Boysko and Marcus Simon and Kathy Tran kind of all stayed, right? The ones that kind of came with new people were the ones that were open districts, right? So there were a couple open districts that were created. HD 19 in the south of the district. I think 15, which is Laura Jane Cohen, in the middle, maybe 15 or 16. And then of course we didn't talk about actual retirements yet. But if we want to get into that, right, like Ken Plum, who has been a delegate for a very long time, decided he wasn't running again, right? So that left an open district, and we had a healthy primary in that. And Karen Keys-Gamarra got elected, former at-large school board member, or I guess current at-large school board member for another month or so. I mean, there are other retirements, right, and mostly at the county level. From the Board of Supervisors, Penny Gross from Mason decided she wasn't running again, and John Faust in Drainsville also retired. And then we had a lot of retirements on the school board. The school board has a lot of turnover just in general. Megan McLaughlin from Braddock, Elaine Tolan from Drainsville, Tammy Koufax from Franconia, Karen Gorbett-Sanders from Mount Vernon, and Abrar Omesh, who is an at-large member. And I think Abrar, just because she's young, she might have something else in mind in the future, but at this point she's not running again for the school board.
And do you think that the culture wars might have played a role in decisions to retire? I'm sure the temperature at the school board was a lot hotter than a lot of those members were used to.
Yeah, I mean, I've had conversations with, the Fairfax County School Board right now is entirely Democratic endorsed, and the newly elected one is the same. So I know these school board members pretty well, and it's been a rough 4 years. I mean, it's been a rough 4 years for everyone, right? But, COVID was bad as it was, right? It was frustrating and hard to run a school system as large as Fairfax County in a pandemic like that. But on top of that, we had kind of, like you called them, culture wars, talking about kids in bathrooms and book banning and whatnot. What are we teaching in classrooms? There's a vocal, very loud minority of people that are doing FOIA requests, monopolizing the time at school board meetings, and making it very difficult and unenjoyable to be a member of the school board.
So did Democrats pick up any new seats in Fairfax County? I mean, I know that Democrats control quite a bit in the county. It might actually be easier to ask what Republicans are still holding.
Well, the only thing that the Republicans are still holding is the Board of Supervisors seat in Springfield, which is Pat Harity. And Pat's been elected for a long time, and I think a lot of people know his dad too, who is a former county chairman. That's the only Republican left elected in Fairfax County as a member of the county government or as a member of the General Assembly. So Fairfax County we kept all the Democratic seats, even though we might have different people in some of those places. We won 49 of the 50 races in Fairfax County, so I think that's pretty good. We picked up the clerk of the court, Chris Falcon, who I understand you're going to have on later, which is great. But we also have new faces too, right? We've won these things, but we've got 2 new senators, 3 new delegates, 2 new supervisors, and the biggest change is 8 new school board members.
Wow. Yeah. So I want to talk a little bit more about who are the new faces and what to expect from them. So we'll talk a little bit more about that when we get back from the break. Stick around, don't go anywhere. We'll be right back with Bryan Graham.
Caitlin, be serious. No, take the oath. Come on. I'm totally taking this seriously. Okay, I'm ready. You may begin. I pledge that I will never meet in person with anyone I first met online without checking with my parent or guardian. And furthermore, if my parent or guardian agrees to the meeting, it will be in a public place and my parent or guardian must come along. Do you pinky swear? I do.
When you teach your kids about internet safety, they'll pass it on. For more information, go to cableclicksmart.org.
Dare to load their minds. Dare to explore. Dare to STEM. Learn more at She Can STEM.
You're not the kind of guy that makes the girls all sigh.
2 for $3.
They never turn their heads and look when you walk by. 'Cause it's the little things.
Oh, thank you.
You're welcome.
Helping.
What a nice young man.
Pass it on.
My goodness.
You are not what you thought.
A message from the Foundation for a Better Life.
I better get out of here. Ooh.
Get it.
Get it. Get it.
Give your town a reason to celebrate, because every Goodwill item you bring home brings job training and more to your community. Goodwill. Bring good home.
We're back to the Inside Scoop. Here again, your host.
Welcome back to Inside Scoop. I'm your host this week, Mary Barthelson. Tonight we're speaking with Bryan Graham, Chair of FCDC. So before the break, we were talking a little bit about the election results in Fairfax County. And so we had retirements, we've had redistricting, but I want to go through the results in a little bit more detail so that people know who's now representing them.
Okay.
So first, starting with the Board of Supervisors, I guess Chairman McKay won his re-election. And can you talk about some of the other elected officials who are still there and who the new faces are?
Sure. Well, it's going to be probably easier for me to think about the new faces first. So in Drainesville, we have Jimmy Bierman, who's replacing John Faust. And in Mason, we have Andreas Jimenez, who was elected to replace Penny Gross. Right. So the rest of the Board of Supervisors is unchanged this year. Right. So if you know who your supervisor is, it's the same. Right. But that's in Braddock. That's James Walkinshaw. Walter Alcorn in Hunter Mill. Mount Vernon is Dan Stork. Providence is Dahlia Palchik. Springfield is still Pat Harity, as we mentioned. Sully is still Kathy Smith. And did I forget one? No, I think that's it, right?
Yeah, I think you got them. Good memory. So we also had a lot of turnover, as you mentioned, on the school board. And we have some candidates coming back who had previously served. So we have Il Young Moon and Ryan McElveen. And so they were on the school board before. Do you know anything about their decision to come back?
Well, I mean, I think they got the luckiest people alive because they skipped the 4 years of COVID. But I mean, Mr. Moon had been on the school board since it was first elected. So he has a lot of experience in the schools and still, I think, kind of missed his passion for the schools. And I think the same kind of goes for Mr. McElveen. And in closing out the third M, Kyle McDaniel is the other kind of at-large candidate that got elected there. The other kind of holdovers, a former at-large school board member, Rashner Sizemore Heiser, is now elected in Braddock. Carl Frisch remaining in the Providence district, and there's probably one or two other ones I'm thinking I can think of. In the Sully district, we picked up Seema Dixit, right? Stella Pekarsky ran for Senate and is now elected in the Senate. And let's see, Drainesville is Robin Lady. That was a retirement. Marcia St. John Cunning. That's actually kind of an interesting legal case during that race, but she was elected to Franconia overwhelmingly. Melanie Merrim was reelected in Hunter Mill. Ricardi Anderson reelected in Mason. Mateo Dunn elected in Mount Vernon, and Sandy Anderson in Springfield.
So what's going on with the court case?
There have been a number of court cases kind of related to the qualifications and really related to the petitions and the validity of the petitions for Marcia St. John Cunning in the Franconia district. I think it's very unusual, the timing of them. They've been challenging. The first challenge was right before the election started, and the second challenge was after the election had started. But they were challenges generated by Republicans really trying to disqualify someone during the middle of the election when thousands of people had already voted, which would have disenfranchised those voters. But today, the latest motion by the Republicans was dismissed by the courts. And if there are further challenges, that will be another process. But right now, they seem to be resolved.
That's good news that that's getting resolved. And before we jump to the state elections, I want to talk about the other positions. I believe Stacey Kincaid, she won re-election, and let's see who else. Steve Descano,
Commonwealth's attorney, got re-elected as well. I mean, those are the big ones. The constitutional officers, along with clerk of the court, which we've already talked about too.
And then I think the only other one is soil and water conservation. And there were three candidates, Chris
Kerner, Rhonda Bitterly, and Dana Barakat.
And were those Democrat-endorsed candidates as well? Okay.
Yes.
So the state elections, the Democrats now control the House and the Senate. So I imagine that you're pretty happy about that Do you think that that was a result that was expected, or were the results more or less favorable than you anticipated?
I mean, I basically feel like we did about what I thought we were going to do. I thought maybe we were going to get 52 in the House and maybe 22 in the Senate, but I think we've seen in the media it be called a repudiation of Youngkin and some of the messaging. I mean, there's a lot of money spent in some of these really critical races. So for it to pan out that way, I think is good for us. There's been a little bit of stagnation in Richmond when you have a Republican House and the Democratic Senate. They kind of swap bills in the middle and then they kill each other's bills. So, unless there's kind of basic things that we have agreement on, there wasn't a lot of change happening in Richmond. So I think we're going to see what Democratic leadership can do. We saw that a couple years ago when we had a lot of things happen under Governor Northam and with Democratic control. Where we got good gun control measures put in, increasing the minimum wage, the affordability of insulin. I mean, there's layers of things that they did back then. So we'll see what kind of Democratic ideas come out of the General Assembly now, and whether or not Governor Youngkin will agree to them or whether he will veto them.
Yes, and you mentioned that there was a lot of money spent this election cycle, and Governor Youngkin raised quite a bit of money. I think the last number I saw was like 30 million since 2021 that he pumped out into these races, but unfortunately he wasn't able to get the victory that he wanted. So I'm curious, what do you think contributed to that? Were Republicans off in their messaging? Were Democrats really strong in their messaging, or was it just something else?
I personally think, and maybe this is not, I mean, I'm biased, but I actually think the Republicans hurt themselves more than we helped ourselves as Democrats. I mean, the Fairfax County didn't have a lot of highly contested races. I mean, you can see from the results, for the most part, the Democrats are getting at least 60% of the vote. So there wasn't a ton of money spent here, but not far from here, like in Western Loudoun County, the race where Russet Perry was successful to win the Senate race. That was I think the most expensive Senate race we've ever had in Virginia, and you have the son of a billionaire running against, you've got that money plus the Youngkin money or whatever. It was very expensive, but I think Republicans, the biggest driver that we've seen, and we've seen it in polling and just heard in messaging as well, has been abortion rights and the abortion message. Republicans. One, I don't think they're entirely credible. They say that they're pro-life, but then they say that they have a compromise on a 15-week abortion ban. But two, I think we've seen kind of across the country in general that in a post-Dobbs world, when people are given the opportunity to vote on this, we saw it in Ohio on the same day. We've seen it in other states, states that you wouldn't even really generally call Democratic states. When people are given the opportunity to keep their rights or defend their rights, they're voting for the rights of women to make those choices themselves. So I think they really hurt themselves there. In a lot of ways, I think that Republicans have done better on messaging on crime than we do, or defending it, right? I think a lot of it's numbers, a numbers game. You can make the numbers say basically whatever you want. But the reality, I mean, crime went up. A lot of that happened because of COVID. Or just other factors, right? I mean, people found out that you could steal a Kia or a Hyundai really easily, right? Over the internet, right? So there's all kinds of things like that. Republicans pretended like it was Commonwealth attorneys that were causing the crime increases, but the data shows that crime was up everywhere. So I don't think really any of that played out. And of course, Democrats have not really been the best at embracing correct messages on this, or messages. Safety is important to people, right? And people want to feel safe, and part of that is making sure that that crime is low. But the good thing that we have here in Fairfax County and other Northern Virginia is that we have relatively low crime. I mean, Fairfax County has the lowest crime of a jurisdiction of its size in the United States of America. So, and then education has been the other flashpoint. And the interesting thing on that, I think, is the Republicans, even though they've been saying a lot of things, at least up here, they have not been very successful with them. I mean, Governor Youngkin made that his rallying cry. They've made it a lot of rallying cry this year, and it just hasn't won. I think people know that they have good schools in Fairfax County because of the Democrats, not in spite of them. And I mean, we're really focused on making sure that we've got safe schools. So kids aren't going to learn if they don't feel comfortable in their schools, if they're hungry, right? So democratic values and positions, I think, are really on the best end of that, right? We want to invest in education. And the Governor Youngkin administration, even though they have made this rallying cry, has also messed up funding for public education as well, and is talking about diverting some public education money as well. So I think we have the right message there.
And so, as you mentioned, a lot of the message from Governor Youngkin was focused on abortion, and that has not been a successful issue. So do you think that Republicans throughout the rest of the country are going to look to Virginia as kind of a lesson for next year, or again in 2025 during the next governor's race?
I would think that they should, but I'm not convinced that they will. I've seen some of the things that Congressman Bob Good elsewhere in Virginia said that they weren't strong enough on abortion. I think that we've seen in national polls and sentiment that thinking has changed about abortion. The other thing that I think is interesting, I think Virginia actually has a fairly decent compromise in place already. The third trimester abortions aren't permitted, and I know Republican messaging talks about late-term abortions or abortions after birth or whatever, but there's are things that don't exist in Virginia without, you have to have 3 doctors sign off if you're going to have an abortion in the third trimester. Like, they talked about a 15-week ban. Less than 2.5% of abortions in Virginia happen after 15 weeks. So what are they really even talking about? I mean, the things that they would do actually would just harm women that need abortions because of their life, to protect their life instead, right? So I don't really understand, other than they think that they had a winning message. They know that there was polling that said 15 weeks seemed reasonable, but the reality of it is always kind of mixed. And we've seen in states that have actually put this into place, they've had all kinds of problems with that as well, in terms of women having health issues and healthcare not wanting to take care of them because of the potential restrictions or concerns. But I mean, we've seen, like I said before, we've seen that I think that they should learn a lesson from this, but I'm not convinced that they will.
Yeah, I'm not too optimistic either. I think that there's like an ideological component there that they won't be quick to abandon. But women did help get Governor Youngkin elected, so perhaps he should have taken that into account before he made that his central message. And as a feminist, I kind of like to see that women are really reshaping politics and our issues are at the forefront. So thank you so much for being here and talking about the election results. Stick around and come right back. We will be speaking with Chris Falcon after the break.
Nice going, Spencer! I can't believe we broke Old Man Hennessy's window.
Correction, dude. You broke. I just threw the ball.
This is really bad. What are we gonna do?
We?
Go to the door, ask for the ball back. Are you serious?
It's my ball, Myrtleback.
You're so dead. I'd run away.
Yeah, to Uruguay.
Kiss your life goodbye. Sorry.
Let's go. See you, dude. See ya. You got me in your well.
Nice one. Some friends you are.
Keep smiling, keep shining.
Hi. Hi. Tell him it was an accident. And we can fix the window. Come on. I'll come with you.
Loyalty. Pass it on.
You go first.
A message from the Foundation for a Better Life.
One day these rats were playing in the woods. Well, it's a matches and that's no good. Listen to smoke before you give it a try. Only you. Don't play with matches. Don't play with fire. Cause there's nothing very funny about freak nothing very nice. Holy smile. So if a gorgeous force is what you desire, don't play with matches. Don't play with fire.
Only you can prevent wildfires.
Fire.
Awkward. I'm the awkward silence. You try to avoid me, then there I am again.
But an awkward silence can be a great thing.
Like Kelly here is about to demonstrate.
You haven't really been yourself lately. Are you okay?
Find out how you can help a friend with their mental health
at seizetheawkward.org.
We're back to the Inside Scoop. Here again, your host.
Welcome back to Inside Scoop. I'm your host this week, Mary Barthelson. We're joined by Chris Falcon, the next Clerk of the Court. Chris, thank you so much for joining us, and congratulations on your victory.
Mary, you bet. Thanks for having me on tonight. Excited to be here.
So I'm sure you're super excited to be done with your race and gearing up to go to work for Fairfax. Do you feel excited to be done with, or?
Oh my gosh, yes. I think you know this, but I had a very long campaign. I filed to run for office in May of last year. So I campaigned essentially for 18 months. So I'm very, very happy to be done with that. And moving on to the next aspect, which is actually running the office, which is what I'm really excited about. Today was a cool day. I went to the Fairfax Circuit Court. I met the current Clerk of Court, John Fry, at the courthouse today, and he welcomed me there, shook my hand, and showed me around the place, introduced me to people. So it was a very, very cool day, one that I've been actually dreaming about for many months. So incredibly excited to get to work for the people of Fairfax.
You did have a very long race. I remember seeing you everywhere. Everyone complimented you on how hard you were working. I saw you at everything. So hopefully now you'll get to rest a little bit. So tell me what election night was like for you.
So election night was a blur. I woke up very, very early. I live in Mason District in Annandale, but I had noticed that there was going to be a precinct that wasn't going to be covered, wasn't going to have volunteers. So I, raised my hand and said, I can't have Glen Forest Elementary School not have someone covering it. So I will open up that school at 5:45 in the morning. That school it's very personal to me. My wife teaches at that elementary school. She's part of the family literacy program, an amazing program that Fairfax County Public Schools has that teaches immigrant families, one, English, but two, about the school system. So I had to be there, and then I was able to hand it off to other volunteers and then just make my way around the entire county the next, 13 hours from 6 a.m. until 7 p.m. I went from Mason District to Providence, down to the southern part of the county, then came back towards the center, went out to South Lakes, was out in Reston, and very cool. I ended the day in Marshall High School, not too far away from where we are right now. And then my family came and met me there, and we made our way to Tyson's to wait for the results along with everyone else. So incredibly long day, but we were very happy with the results in the end. It felt very fulfilling to know that all that hard work paid off. I know that it was wild to people that someone was running for Clerk of Court that far ahead of when the election was going to be, but I really wanted this, right? I've been working as a Deputy Clerk of Court for 9 years, and I had some really good ideas on things we could do here in the county and in Fairfax City to improve the lives for people and make the justice system just a little bit more accessible and a little bit more user-friendly. So I know we're going to be talking about those later, but I'm very excited to talk about those initiatives.
And so you mentioned your family was with you on election night, your parents were there, and you actually grew up in the district.
That's right.
Didn't you?
They did.
So what was getting your start like here growing up as little Chris?
So my parents are my heroes. They immigrated to the United States from Peru and Ecuador, my mom in '68, my dad in '71. And my memories of growing up in Falls Church are just of them really, really working hard to provide us an amazing life. I was very proud to have been sent to the Fairfax County Public Schools. I started in Pine Spring Elementary as a 4.5-year-old kindergartner, just learning the English language. We spoke Spanish at home primarily, so I knew a few phrases when I started, but I thank Fairfax County Public Schools for the education that I received. I took it very personal on the campaign trail when I would sometimes be at events and people would be trashing our public school system. That is unfair and it's not accurate. There is always a voice for parents, and it's called the PTOs and the PTA, so I encourage people to get involved. But Pine Spring Elementary, Mantua Elementary, Frost Middle School, Woodson High School, amazing schools where I had educators that I think every step of the way saw potential in me in every single grade and helped me and gave gave me the tools to make me the successful person that I am today. And my parents were there on election night. They met me. They were volunteering on election day at one of my old elementary schools, Mantua. My brother was at Pine Spring Elementary volunteering. My entire family was spread all over the county volunteering that day, and we all met in Tyson's to wait for the results to come in. But it's pretty emotional, you know, to receive the call that I had won, and then to go downstairs and see my whole family. I lost it, sure. I mean, I broke down, gave my parents a big hug, and, you know, cried a little bit, but it was exhaustion, but just like happiness too, for all the good things that I know we're gonna be able to do now for the residents in this county.
And that's wonderful. So I believe you're a lawyer by trade.
That's right.
Where did you go to college?
So after I graduated from Woodson High School, I went to James Madison University, and then I came home, and for a year, before I went to law school, I really wanted to figure out, do I want to do this? Like, do I really want to be an attorney or not? So I went to go work for a year as a law clerk for a law firm in McLean and Reston. And after that year, I decided I would go off to law school, and I went to a small law school called Widener Commonwealth in Harrisburg, Pennsylvania. But Widener Commonwealth has this excellent program called the Law and Government Certificate, and it's for people that want to come back and work in government as an attorney. So I was part of that program, and when that concluded, I came back to Fairfax County and worked in private practice for a couple of years until it was time to come to the public sector. And no, I mean, the rest is history. I went to go work for the clerk of the court's office in Arlington 9 years ago. I never left. I fell in love with the work and the opportunity that you have in that office to work with people when they're dealing with some of the hardest times of their lives. You know, the clerk of the court is the office that people come to when they're experiencing very happy moments, when they're getting married, buying a home, adopting a child, but it's also where they go when they file for divorces. It's also where people go when a loved one passes away and they have to now file the will, the last will and testament of their loved one. So it's an office that interacts with people during these incredibly serious, heavy moments of their lives. So that's what I think I fell in love with, working in that office these past 9 years as legal counsel and deputy clerk in the Arlington Circuit Court, and that there was this opportunity to do it here in Fairfax County, where I've lived my entire life. But yes, I'm an attorney by trade, still a licensed lawyer. I had a private practice, the Falcon firm, for a number of years, and it's closing, and dedicating myself now to the public sector, to the people.
You have quite a bit of experience from working in Arlington on these same issues. I could list some of them, but why don't you tell us a little bit more about what you've done there?
Absolutely. So I currently serve as the Civil Division Supervisor, as Deputy Clerk, as Legal Counsel. I was formerly the FOIA Officer, the Freedom of Information Act Officer, and also the person that handled all the ballots. Because after every single election, the ballots come to the Clerk of Court's office. And I actually still have my day job. I haven't given it up yet. So today, ballots came to our courthouse in Arlington in boxes from the registrars. And I was there pushing in those boxes on a cart into the courthouse. And people were like congratulating me on the election. And I was like, hi. And they're like, you're still here? I'm like, I'm still here. You know, I'm coming over soon. But no, it's an office where I've gotten to do a huge number of things, including representing us in federal court. You know, when we've been sued, which is public record, it happens every now and then. Every person, every government agency, everyone has litigation filed against them at some point. I've put on my suit and I've gone and I've represented our office in both the federal and the state courts. So, but one of the best things we've done, I believe, is community outreach. In the past year, we were able to do community building work. Our office was able to partner with the Commonwealth's attorney and hold expungement clinics. And for those that may not be aware, expungement is a law in Virginia that allows people to remove criminal charges from their record for things they were never convicted of. So let's say, for example, someone was charged with shoplifting, but they were found not guilty, or there wasn't enough to go forward and the charges were dropped. In Virginia, those charges stay on people's criminal records forever unless you actually proactively move forward to remove them and expunge them. So what you end up having are people that go and apply for jobs or apply for credit or try to, you know, move forward with their lives, and these charges pop up when they're trying to get a job, and it's problematic for them. So what we did was we partnered with our prosecutor, our Commonwealth's attorney, and held these free clinics where people could come in and meet with lawyers on the spot and fill in paperwork to have those charges removed from their record. And we held 2 clinics in the past year, helped dozens of people clean up their records. And that's what I've proposed, that one of the many things that I've proposed we need to start doing in Fairfax County this year.
That sounds like a really great experience, and I'm glad that you're going to be bringing that now to Fairfax. What are the differences between Arlington County and Fairfax County? I believe Arlington's office is a little bit smaller. Is that accurate?
That's right. It's considerably smaller. I mean, it's a smaller jurisdiction. We're talking about a staff in Arlington of like 30 compared to a staff about 175 in Fairfax. So the scope today of what I saw is a much larger office. But what I've said all along is that scope, that difference is very doable if you have good systems in place. And that was my top issue in the election that I just ran, providing free online case information access in Fairfax County. To date, to this moment, Fairfax is still the only place where you can't go on your phones right now at home and go to the only county where you can't do this and go on the Virginia Supreme Court system to find out what's happening in current cases. It's the only court that doesn't provide that for free online. So I'm on record that I will change that and move us to a free system so that people can pull up case information. Let me give as an example. When I was campaigning in Oakton, I would run into people that would want to know what's happening in that case where there was this horrible car crash where 2 girls got killed. What's happening with that? And I would tell them, I can't actually find that out and show you right now because that information is kept behind a paywall. So that is a real life example of people in a community that wanted to know what was happening and couldn't find that out because the clerk's office was keeping that information behind that paywall. You have to pay $150 for 3 months of access to public information. So that was my top issue, that I was going to bring down that paywall, and I will bring down that paywall. Starting next year, people will be able to go on their phones, plug in cases like you can in the federal court system, and find out what's happening, what's been filed, who are the parties, what are the case numbers. I mean, these are real life issues, and I believe the public they should have access to public information. I never think someone should have to pay to see their own public information. So that was my top issue. I will deliver on that next year. But those are examples of the good systems in place. Another one is during COVID in the Arlington courthouse, we had invested on good e-systems, and one of those is a call center. So I believe people that call in should be able to press 2 and schedule a call back. So small things like that.
Yeah, that's really interesting to learn more. And I'd like to hear a little bit more about your plans and what we can expect in the upcoming years. We're about to go to break. Stick around, we'll be right back with Chris Falcon, our next clerk of the county court, in a couple of minutes.
There. Can I tell you a cat joke? Just kidding. Why did the girl ask the mushroom to dance? Because he was a fun guy. What do you call a pig that knows karate? Pork chop.
Why was the basketball court all wet?
Why?
Because the players kept dribbling all over it. Can I tell you another one? So how does a tissue dance? Put a little boogie on it.
What's Beethoven's favorite fruit? Banana. What is a boxer's favorite drink? Fruit punch.
Mom, I got it. What are you doing in there?
I got stuck.
Are you a dog?
I wouldn't do that. Have you seen the pliers? Where'd you find those?
It's not your birthday.
Sorry.
Bye, Grandpa.
Bye, Grandpa.
Take care of yourself.
What are you doing? What are you looking for?
We're back to the Inside Scoop. Here again, your host.
Welcome back to Inside Scoop. I'm your host this week, Mary Barthelson. We're joined by our guest, Chris Falcon, the next clerk of the county court in Fairfax. Chris, thanks for being here again.
You bet.
I'm really enjoying hearing all about your plans as our next clerk in Fairfax. So I want to talk a little bit more about your ideas. And you've mentioned you might bring satellite pop-up offices. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, absolutely. So that was an idea that came out recently. The county owns space in different parts of the county. The county circuit court is located in Fairfax City. So as I was campaigning around Fairfax County, I would start to realize I was now very far away from Fairfax City when I was down in South County, Lorton, Mount Vernon, when I was in Reston and Herndon. So the idea was to create and talk to the county supervisors about space in the county-owned spaces in North County, in South County government centers. And there is space available to then start a productive conversation about holding satellite offices, about having limited service 2 days a month where people can come to those areas and also be able to do things like apply for marriage licenses, get copies of their deeds, get copies of their public records, come in and get their notary commissions, because the clerk of the court's office is also the office that authorizes all the notary publics for the jurisdiction. So that is being done in different parts of the country where you have large counties and not just one central location that everyone needs to come to. I believe we can save people time and money by bringing the services out to them in those different areas that are more than 10 miles away from the Fairfax City Courthouse. So we started talking about that a couple of months ago. I know that there's a willingness there, and I've also been in those government centers, and I know there's some space. One of the things I personally took part in a couple of years ago was DMV would have these DMV selects in government offices, and I was able to go get my license renewed at one of their pop-ups in a county space. So that's what I'm talking about. I know from experience that clerk of the court, we can pretty much operate if you give us a laptop and a printer and a chair. I mean, that can be a pop-up clerk's office satellite location. That is essentially what we've done during our expungement clinics. We have had laptops, some date stampers, some pens, and a bag, and goodwill, and people with good attitudes that are there to be there. So I think it's just an example of, like, we have to start thinking outside the box and not being tied into the idea that everyone has to come to us in that big, beautiful courthouse on Cambridge Road. It's a wonderful place, but I'm also very sensitive to the issues that are affecting the people that I've met over the past year and a half. And what I've encountered are people that don't have a ton of time and money to be wasting, losing half a day of work. If we can come to them in Reston and Herndon, why don't we evaluate that as an option? If we can do the same in South County and save people not just the lost time at work, but also childcare, transportation. I talked about these ideas with Sierra Club when I was seeking their endorsement, and they loved it because I said we can also reduce congestion on the roadways, greenhouse gas emissions. So I'm very excited about the possibility of pop-up satellite offices around the county.
Yeah, I'd definitely be excited for that to come to Reston. We do have an aging population there, and so I know for some demographics it can be harder to get out and make it all the way down to the government center if they need to file something. So that'd be awesome if we got that. And I know that you're also working on, I think something you mentioned was public safety.
Yeah, so one of our roles, which I talked a lot about on the campaign trail, is that people, by and large, didn't know much about the clerk of the court's office. That became evident over the last year and a half. You know, when I would knock on a door, sometimes, and I would introduce myself as a candidate for clerk of court, people would say to me, do we even vote for that here? And that happened more than once. And I would chuckle and say, we do. It's only on the ballot every 8 years, so you've probably forgotten. Or they would say, well, we didn't live here 8 years ago. That's good to know. What does your office do? So it was nice. I would have an opportunity to talk about it, but I would almost always then talk about our public safety roles. And that is making sure that background checks are performed on all concealed handgun permit applications. All the concealed handgun permit applications in this county come to the county clerk. It is our job to file those, but only to issue a concealed handgun permit to someone after they have passed a background check. after it's been very clear that there were no disqualifying factors found, that they were not someone that is a convicted stalker, right, or someone that has had issues that would be someone that you don't want being a concealed handgun carrier. So I think the public didn't know much about the office, but they were very reassured to know that there was someone with experience that really cared about public safety, because I made it clear to them the public safety roles of the office, like our concealed handgun permits, are a priority for me. I don't tell people to drop like everything they're doing, but I do tell them if those cases and those type of issues come to our desk, they are a priority. The other one is our red flag laws, substantial risk orders. Those are handled by the clerk of the court. And I personally have handled the majority of our red flag law cases in the jurisdiction that I'll be leaving in a few weeks. Those would end up on my desk. And for those that may not be aware, red flag laws are the orders where law enforcement has responded to a situation where they have deemed someone to be a risk to themselves or to others, and they've confiscated firearms. And on that order, there's a place for them to list the firearms that were confiscated. But every single person that has a red flag law order executed against them gets a due process hearing. They have a hearing in front of a judge where they get to come in and explain what was going on that day. But Mary, it's really important for the viewers at home to know this. These cases occur by and large when there's someone threatening their own life, or they're threatening the life of someone they live with. So these are domestic violence situations, and I'm very proud that over the past 3 years since our red flag laws became law in Virginia, they have gone through seamlessly in our office. And so I let the voters know these are one of the things your clerk of court is in charge of, and they're a priority for me. And I support our red flag laws, and I carry them out, you know, very, very carefully. And we went so far in the jurisdiction where I still work to convene a work group where the clerk's office would meet with the police, with representatives from the sheriff's office, with the Commonwealth's attorney, and go over the cases that we were handling to discuss different things we were seeing. So that's the kind of partnership and things that I'm excited to bring to Fairfax County very soon.
That's good to hear as well. Digitizing land records is something else that has been brought up a lot. I imagine that those go back quite a long ways. Is there a goal to digitize all of them or some of them? What's going to happen with that?
That's a great question. So that came up on a recent candidate forum where I was asked that question. So there is an enormous cost associated with digitizing records. People may not be aware, but especially when the records are very, very old and they have to be handled with incredible care. So I actually have to give some credit to my predecessor, Mr. Fry, the clerk of the court of Fairfax. There are an enormous number of records that have been digitized in Fairfax County. So credit is there where it's due. We can do more, but I also have to balance the costs associated with that. I made a promise that I was going to keep this budget within what we've had and not explode the budget. And I hope that our taxpayers and people watching at home tonight can understand that I'm going to be very, very careful with our budget. Of course, I want to digitize things back. But there's also an opportunity, if these are not records that are being requested constantly, then I don't think it makes any sense to digitize like 50 years of records if you're only getting like 1 or 2 requests a week, right? In those situations, we can go pull the record and digitize it on a case-by-case basis. But above all, I'm going to be very, very careful with our budget and really manage that, because I've met so many people over this past year and a half that are really making ends meet right now, and I want to try to keep our tax costs down in this county.
Is fraud at all a concern with making access to all of these records easier?
Absolutely it is. Thanks for asking that. So I was talking with Mr. Fry, the current clerk today, about what things I want to put online. And absolutely, I want to get public case information online right away. That is available in every other county in Virginia and in the federal system. So we're talking about case numbers, case names, the names of documents like motions, complaints, lawsuits, and then hearing dates and times. None of that is PII. None of that is personal identifying information. But the things that do contain our private information, I don't have any plan on putting those records online. I know there were people that were concerned about that during the election, but let me assure you, those records are going to be held with care. My personal records, everyone's personal records, are no business being thrown online. They're not going to be made public. But public case information, absolutely. It's going to be online very soon.
Great. So one last thing that I wanted to ask you about, you mentioned that growing up, your first language wasn't English, it was actually Spanish. And for a lot of the kids that I grew up with, my family spoke English as our first language, but for their families, a lot of times the kids would end up having to translate stuff for them. Really important documents, probably that like an 8 or 9-year-old doesn't really understand. So is language access something that you're looking at bringing to the county as well?
100%. It's something that is very personal to me. I've been very, very clear that we're going to make sure that all of our customer service positions that get advertised on the county website have language as a plus. If you speak another language other than English, please apply to the clerk of the court's office. We need you. We need you at our counters. We need you answering our phone calls, responding to emails. I believe excellent customer service is when you are meeting people where they are, and that doesn't just mean geographically going to where they live. It means meeting people where they are with their language abilities, right? I mean, one of my favorite moments at the clerk's office over the past 9 years, and it has repeated itself over and over again, are when Spanish-speaking individuals walk into my office and they're looking and they look at me and they're kind of searching my face and they say to me, ¿Hablas español? And I say, claro que sí, ¿cómo le puedo ayudar? Do you speak Spanish? Of course I do. How can I help you, right? Like, and that replicates itself in other languages all the time. That to me is beautiful. And it's part of what makes Fairfax County amazing, right? Like, we have a government that fosters that promotes that thinks that's a really good thing, right? That we are offering service in multiple languages. I'm very proud of the work that's been done in this county. I'm excited to build on that. But yeah, I absolutely want people applying to the clerk of the court's office if they have language abilities other than English, because we need you. We need you there.
And so that's pretty much our show for the night. I really enjoyed learning more about the clerk of the court position. That was also something that I didn't know that much about, and I learned from your race, so I'm sure that there were a lot of other people that learned as well. And I think it's really exciting that we might see these services get moved out to other parts of the county and just have so much more access for more people. I know this is a nonpartisan position, but I'm happy to see someone that shares my values as a Democrat also take on this role, and I know that you will be committed to serving everyone, so thank you so much for running, and I'm happy that you won.
Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you all for joining us. Join us next week on The Inside Scoop.